So for our 8th day of class, we remained in Asia and learned about some Chinese cultural traditions. And before I get into those traditions, quick reminder how historians go about disaggregating things between this notion of a Western Civ and an Eastern Civ. This is very simplistic, but on the basic of levels, Eastern Civ is predicated on the universal, soul and intellect, the interrelatedness and oneness and unification and harmony, the we, if you will, as opposed to the I, the individualism of the West, which focuses on the accumulation of knowledge and mastering and controlling reality. You are a separate part from the whole. This is the big difference between the two. And on an equally simplistic level, oftentimes people bookend Western Civ and Eastern Civ with these two men. Socrates, who taught Plato, who taught Aristotle, Spa, and the rise of Western Hellenistic civilization with Alexander the Great, and from the Greeks to the Romans to the Byzantines into Europe and so on. Whereas the East tends to begin with Confucius, and I'm fully aware a lot of history happened before that. Bearing in mind, your exam is on 1200 AD to the present, so I'm not going to go in that direction. I'm going to move forward, but just to kind of give you that perspective that there's a Western world and Eastern world. Okay, so another reminder from the old days. China had one of the 4 river valley civilizations, the original civilizations in human history. Mesopotamia with the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Egyptians with the Nile, and the Indus Valley with the Indus River, and the ancient Chinese civilization along the Yellow River. China has existed continually longer than any group of people on planet Earth. It's an over 5,000 year history. That's the longest, okay? So, talking about what made China successful, to have that continuity over time, really stems from this dynastic cycle. So this dynastic cycle is very formulaic. So step 1, a new ruler unites China, founds a new dynasty, and gains the mandate of heaven. This notion that whoever is running the show has been ordained by divinity to do so. And then under this new dynasty, prosperity, life is good. The population goes up. Life is pretty good. But then corruption sneaks in and things start to go down and decline and become less stable. A natural disaster can come around and cause a drought or cause flooding. And with the corruption and with that overpopulation, famine kicks in. China has endured many famines throughout its time. Then the famine causes the population to rebel, and it starts a civil war. The ruler has lost this mandate of heaven. The divinity no longer wants this person to run the show. The population decreases because of starvation and violence, and China goes through a warring states. And then one state will emerge victorious. This brand new state starts anew, and the mandate of heaven has, the divinity has deemed this new group of people or this new individual the people who should be running the show. Okay, lather, rinse, repeat. And again, this went on for centuries and centuries and centuries. Okay, so again, this mandate of heaven is the right to rule granted by heaven. So with every overthrow, you are justified. I am taking over the old regime because I have been deemed by the heavens the person who should be running the show. Ruler is actually called literally the son of heaven. Okay? And again, you lose the mandate when there's corruption and people don't have enough money in their pocket because they're paying taxes, or officials aren't doing their things, and revolts and civil war and crime and natural disasters. General unpleasantness causes somebody to lose that mandate of heaven. Okay? Another Chinese principle that has been around for centuries and centuries is veneration of ancestors. Please don't confuse it with worshiping. It is not worshiping. It is trying to kind of incarnate the names of people who have come before them and try to live according to the good things they did, to live a righteous life, to make them proud, to remember them and try to include them in your life And that's veneration of ancestors, okay? Is not worship. But, you know, in the West, we don't emphasize this very much. Most people can't go back more than 2-3 generations. We have no idea who came before us. The Chinese are quite different, quite different. Okay, Confucianism, the aforementioned Confucius. Now, Confucius was around about 2,500 years ago. Very strong-willed, came from a wealthy family. He was traveling around looking to kind of find his place in the world. Wound up realizing he was an excellent teacher, world-class teacher. And he compiled his teachings in a book called the Analects. Okay, so these Confucian ideas were fundamentally moral and ethical in character. They wanted order. Okay, order and ritual was at the crux of this. And it was the attempt to form junzi, superior individuals, people who are exceptional. Okay, and he edited Zhou classics and earlier Chinese works for his disciples to study. And he was smart enough to take what was good from the past and perpetuate it into the future. And it's predicated on these concepts of humility, propriety, filial piety, being good to your parents. Okay, and these relationships are the basis of society. Very orderly, strict, but it works. It works. Confucianism is still an influence today. Now, legalism is this doctrine of statecraft, and it's a ruthless approach. Essentially, as a leader, sometimes you have to make some really hard decisions and do some things that are tough for the sake of being a leader. There's a time and a place to really be tough and just severe order. And a good leader knows when to do that. Okay, but legalism is maybe a harsher form of Confucianism, if that makes sense to you. But this is a Chinese concept that was part of their continuity over time. Now, MOISM is this notion of universal love and cooperation and being loyal and being practical. And, you know, it's a sense, there's a time and a place for this where you need to be disciplined and improve yourself and work together as a group. I think I would love to see this concept of MOISM in my group projects that I assign to you over the year, where you can, you know, work together and cooperate and be disciplined. That would be lovely. There's a time and a place for MOISM. Now, Taoism is another belief system that grew out of China, and it comes from Tao, the way of nature, the way of the cosmos, the way it is, if you want to keep it simple. The opposites are in balance, but they're complementary, okay? And if you look at this yin-yang logo, you can think of this duality, simple duality. You know, there's cold, there is hot, there is good, there is evil, there is happy, there is sad. But it's all part of the human experience, okay? And accepting this is the way it is. This is the way of the world. And living in acceptance and going with that, okay? And this literal going, or the word going with the flow, wu wei, okay? Where wu wei, you really look for simplicity. You go according with nature. Whatever skills and gifts you have, you go with them, okay? Here, I'll use a meatheady analogy. If I'm a football coach and I have a team full of really big guys, I'm not going to try to do offense that's predicated on speed. I'm going to do one that's based on power, and vice versa. If I have a bunch of little quick guys, I'm not going to try to overpower somebody. That would be going against the flow. If I am really lousy at math, I'm not going to go try to be an accountant, okay? If I'm really good at math, I'm going to be an accountant because I'm going with the flow. I'm living in harmony with the nature of things. And that's the nature of self and the nature of the world and nature at large. You go with the flow. And this is another Chinese concept. Okay, so again, China has had over 5,000 years of continuous civilization, the longest in human history, and it is predicated on these sorts of belief systems that you read about in your book, we talked about in class: Wu Wei, Taoism, MOISM, legalism, Confucianism. Okay, the veneration of ancestors, and the dynastic cycle that's predicated on the mandate of heaven. You put these things together, that's kind of a flavor. It's an overview of China, which we'll learn about in more detail as the year goes on. So thank you for watching.